This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. Learn more at indiefilmhustle.tv. I'd like to welcome to the show Zack Morrison. Man, how you doing, Zack?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Man, thank you so much for coming on. I was introduced to your plight when I read this amazing article in the Wall Street Journal about what you are going through, what you've gone through. And it is a topic that is dear to my heart, which is student debt. But I had not quite heard about it from the Ivy League side of things, because when I think film school, I don't think Ivy League, generally speaking. But before we jump into the deep end of the pool on that, first I have to ask you a question. What made you want to become a filmmaker? Like, what was the catalyst?
Oh, man. I think what really did it off. I mean, I grew up watching movies, sure. And so like I'm just a big movie fan my whole life, even as a kid. But the thing that really did it was I was really into Legos as a kid. Mm-hmm. Like that was my whole thing, was like playing with Legos and building, like not following the directions of the thing and like building my own stuff and forming these little stories with these Lego people in my head. And every year on Christmas, that was like the big family activity was, after all the presents and stuff were over and family's over, we would all sit down and like build a Lego set together, especially my grandfather and I. And one year, I must have been 8 or 9 years old. The Lego set that year was a Steven Spielberg Lego set.
Nice.
And it was the coolest thing. It was like you built, a little cityscape and a dinosaur to come in and knock it down, but you also built like the camera crew and the lights and like all the grip and everything.
Stop it. Why isn't this in my life? Why isn't this in my life?
You can find it on eBay. It's the coolest thing ever. But it came with, how like it has the instruction book on how to build the set. In the back of it was a storyboard for frames of how to shoot the movie. Ugh. The movie that the set teaches you how to do. And it came with this little camera and this very, very basic editing software. And it blew my mind. It was without a doubt the coolest thing. So I started making this little Lego movie. And then from that point on, I like played with the Lego set for a day, got rid of it. And then now I just had this camera and this editing software at 8 years old. And it was off to the races. I started, stealing my dad's camcorder on every family vacation. I would go out in the backyard in like middle school, and that's when like Jackass was big. So it was like, hey, we're hanging out in the backyard and like doing stuff, and like our friends, we would all get together and just film stuff. And when high school came around, I played sports, but I rode the bench because I was a terrible athlete. So, but I would do all the sports highlight tapes for all my athlete friends, and just from that point on, I just knew. So, by the time I got to college, I was just, that's all I wanted to do with my life was make short films and specifically comedy. And it's quite literally the thing I've been doing for my whole life.
It sounds like it's from 8 years old. I didn't find my passion until I was in my teens, but I was given a camcorder, and I'm a bit older than you. So, you had technologies that I did not have access to. I was editing between 2 VCRs, back in the day. But that sounds like it. It sounds like once you get bitten by that damn bug, you can't get rid of it. It's done. It's a done disease that we're stuck with for the rest of our lives. So
it's a curse that doesn't go away.
So so you've been making movies all from 8 years old until 18, 19, I guess at that point, and you decide, hey, you know what? I think I want to go to film school. So can I ask you what year was that, by the way, that you went to film school?
My senior year in high school was 2010. So like college, like the college discussion was happening around like 2009, 2010.
Okay. So there was a lot of stuff out there for education as far as filmmaking at that point. Right. Still wasn't a tremendous amount, but it was not like today, but still there were some YouTube channels, there were some education, things like that. You had been directing and shooting and editing your own stuff for such a long time. Why did you decide that you wanted to go to film school? And then we'll decide, and then we'll talk about which film school you chose.
Yeah. I think the big thing for me was, especially as a high school student, I was in hindsight extremely fortunate. My high school had like the arts programs at my in my township
Nice.
and my high school were very like they prided themselves in establishing those. So we had video production courses in high school. I was in the band, so I was playing music and stuff as well. And so I knew art in some form and some medium was the thing. And I had I loved it so much. And the fact that I could do it in school was like a life-changing sort of revelation that I had. Because up to that moment, school, like that was the hobby I did after school. That was the thing I did on weekends. And school was like math and science and history. And I was like an okay student, but I was not inspired by any of it. And, as you grow up and you get through high school, you start thinking like that, what am I going to do with the rest of my life thing? And I realized I wanted to make films. I want to tell stories. Like that's the thing I want to do. And I knew that just knowing how the kind of student I was and the kind of, environment that is conducive for me, I knew I wanted to go to a film program, and some of my favorite, like all-time favorite filmmakers went to film school. And that was, in doing research, that was the path that, that made sense in my 17-year-old brain. Because this was before like Ryan Connolly and Film Riot really blew up. This was before like the sort of DIY film education on YouTube became a thing. There was a lot of like sketch comedy, like Smosh was huge, and that was when Andy
Rocket
Samberg
Jump
was on.
Yeah,
Rocket Jump. Andy Samberg was on SNL at the time, so like the idea of like you can make funny videos was very much a thing, but the how do I go about pursuing like the craft in a broader sense, the option that made sense to me was film school. So junior year of high school, I was looking at programs, and obviously I checked it. You look at NYU, you check out all the the big undergrad programs, but I'm from New Jersey, and so I always had Rutgers as like the state school in my back pocket. I live now even 5 minutes down the road from campus. All my family went there. I have baby pictures in Rutgers gear. And so, I always knew that was a thing. But at the time, there was no film program. There was not a thing. They had journalism, they had broadcast, and they had film studies, but there was no filmmaking. And it became I think after like I applied to schools and NYU rejected me. The traditional sort of undergrad film programs all rejected me because whatever.
Don't feel bad.
It came down to I had no, I don't lose sleep over it. But it came down to Emerson College in Boston and Rutgers were my kind of top two choices. And I was also I played volleyball in high school, and the coach at Emerson, it was a D3 program, and so he brought me up for a recruiting visit, and I visited the film classes, and it was awesome. And it, as this was like everything I wanted. I could play, the game that I love, and I could do the stuff that I love for school, and it made sense. And then I saw the bill or what it would have been. And at that time, it was just it was outside of what a budget for college would have been compared to in-state tuition at my state school. And so Rutgers just ended up making sense. And so I decided to go there for undergrad.
Right. Okay. So you went to Rutgers, and then you decided to go to Columbia University for film. Now, I've been in the business a long time, and I know all the film programs pretty well. Columbia is not one of the ones that gets spoken about often. So it's not AFI, it's not UCLA, USC, NYU, it's not even LA Film School or Full Sail. It's an Ivy League school. So when you think Ivy League, you don't generally think film program.
True, but I will say that I think specifically if you're looking at the graduate film programs, and like every year with like the Hollywood Reporter and whatever that article is that like lists them all,
It's on there somewhere.
Yeah, your top five are Columbia and NYU on the East Coast, and AFI, UCLA, and USC in LA.
Okay.
And those are at least domestically in the US, I would consider the five top programs. And anyone you ask that you can plus minus whatever the rankings are. I know Chapman's a good one also. But specifically for graduate film programs, it was always on my list. It was always I had an undergrad professor that went there and taught there, and so he kind of gave us the Kool-Aid a little bit. But the thing that made me really want to go to film school in general was I did 4 years of undergrad, loved it, had the time of my life. And Rutgers was developing a film program as I was there. I was kind of like the guinea pig student for what a film major could be. Like every semester they kept adding classes and I kept taking them, and I did like an individualized major. And it was cool. And I was like in the room my senior year when they the governor's office was like, okay, there will now be a BFA in film after you're gone, which was, and I was super proud of it. But, after 4 years of like advocating and stuff, I'm glad now students at the art school at Rutgers have a program.
Let me ask you, let me interrupt you, but let me ask you a question. What made you think, who gave you the information that said that you needed a master's degree or even a bachelor's degree in film to make it in the film industry? Is that just something that you came up with, or someone was telling you this?
Oh no one told me that. I knew that this was a path that I was choosing for myself. And because everyone, like, I have a bunch of friends who never went to film school. I know there were a bunch of filmmakers that never went, and it was I never felt like that was the only answer. I just felt like that was the path that made sense for me.
Okay. Fair enough.
Undergrad opened up so many opportunities for me. Everything I've done up to that point was as a result of school. And every film that I had in every festival, all the trips and like the people I met and the jobs that I had, everything came through school, through the transfer property, all a product of, my connections that I made at Rutgers. And so, when it came down to, senior year in college now, this is like 2014, and I was working a lot. I had a huge portfolio of narrative films and music videos, and I'm directing stuff all the time. And, I'm working at MTV at the time as like in their on-air promos department, like, here's what's coming up next on Teen Wolf and like a bunch of stuff. And so, I was starting to think like, okay, what's next? And the two options that were presented, that just sort of made sense to me was, one, I could, spend 10, 15 grand, buy like a red, go in New York and hustle as like a freelance production guy. It was a totally valid option. Option B was write my feature film and just like fuck it, do it live, which was a thing we said all the time in college. So it's like, yeah, maybe I can just like do my feature now. But I knew I wasn't ready. I knew I didn't have just the sense of self as both a person and then a business manager and then an artist. Like it just wasn't, I wasn't ready to do that yet. And option C was look into graduate film schools, because, again, like I had professors who I went to undergrad, who I had for undergrad, went to grad school. And so they kind of told me about that. But then also looking up like, that at Tisch at NYU, Spike Lee doesn't work with the undergrads. He works with the grad students. And at AFI, the Peter Stark producing program, that's a graduate program. And so I just started thinking, okay, there's a potential avenue here, and being from the East Coast, I looked into New York City schools, and NYU obviously is the big kind of name one, but you look at a school like Columbia, who has Jennifer Lee, Catherine Bigelow, just a ton of people who have come out of there, and so the program got on my radar. And then I applied to NYU, Columbia, and USC, because I figured if I'm gonna do this unnecessary thing, right? If I'm gonna go to school, I might as well go to a program that means something to some people potentially, and that to go to And so I got rejected from NYU and USC at the same day, and so I was like, all right, I guess school's not going to be it. It's fine. It's not, I'll just go in the city and hustle, and then I got a call for an interview at Columbia, and so it just the choice kind of just fell into my lap. Like it was
like almost made for you.
Yeah, and like at that point, you get an offer like that, you say yes and you figure it out later,
So at the point before your undergraduate, what was the cost, tuition wise?
Tuition wise, it was I don't know, off the top of it was like in-state tuition 20. It was like 20 something a year, something like that.
20
like
a year.
Yeah. And my mom worked at the school, so all save for one, like my first year tuition was it wasn't tuition remission, it was like tuition reimbursement. So we kept like recycling the same tuition check each year. And then the only costs were room and board and the random fees that go into school. So it wasn't, I wasn't finishing college like undergrad with a lot of debt at all.
Okay, good. So it was a very manageable amount of debt going into undergraduate, which is same for me. When I went to Full Sail in Orlando, which is a tech college, and I paid, I think total when I came out, my student debt was, I think, anywhere between 18 and 25, if you include like living costs and stuff like that off campus and stuff. And it was 95, 96. Okay. So it's a little bit different time, obviously. Yeah. And at that point, there was really no other option. Like there was just no information anywhere other than books and behind the scene videos and stuff. Like there was nothing. So I didn't have an option at the time. And like, okay, I guess this is the film school I went to. Okay, so then you go into Columbia, and then how many years were you in the program for graduate?
Yeah, so Columbia's MFA program, it's very unique in the sense that it's a 3 to 5 year program.
Jesus.
Wow. And most MFAs are 2 years. You're in and out.
Right.
And so thankfully it was still only 2 years of class and 2 years of full-time tuition. But the interesting part was year 3 and onward, you become an artist in residency at the school. And so, if you think about how that would compare to a more standard 2-year MFA where you do your 2 years of class, you kind of, in your second year, you just focus on your thesis film and then you're out. And then you have a year to a couple years after grad school to sort of do that next, to like either write the script or do the movie kind of on your own, or like whatever your calling card piece is going to be. And Columbia, I kind of fell in love with their philosophy of, look, you're going to do that work anyway. Why not do it here under our supervision, with our resources, with all your classmates here on campus. And it was an interesting concept, and so I ended up staying for 4 years. It was 2 years of like full-time class, 21 credit semesters, no time for working an outside job. And then year 3 and year 4, the total opposite. I had no class, no like project work or anything. It was just cool. I was a screenwriting student, so like write your pages and do your movie, then do your short, and call us when you have it.
So what were the costs for each year?
So the kind of full-time part, year 1 and year 2, that was like your 50, 60 grand. I think it was like 60 something a year. And then plus the cost of living in New York City, because so I ended up taking out loans that ended up being something in like the 80-ish, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, but something like the 80-ish, per year, because I also had to take out loans to afford to live in New York, and not work. And then year 3 and year 4, like those thesis years, it was significantly less, but it was still a good amount. So, grand total, it came out to like, including like the, all the interest that might've been generated, I'm up to like 290 something from just grad school. And then you add on like the little bit of debt I'm in left for undergrad, and it kind of kicks me over that 300 level.
My stomach is turning, brother. I'm so sorry. As you're saying these numbers, I'm like, and it's like you're living it, and I'm just like, and it's so painful to hear. Did you understand the financial obligations you were getting into when you sign up for? I know you obviously had just graduated with a BA, so you're not dumb, right? But did you really grasp what was going on? Did you think in your mind, oh well, I'll just sign up for this. This is a great opportunity. I'm gonna make $1 million first few years anyway. Like, what was the mindset of this? Because that's what I did. I'm like, yeah, Hollywood should just bring the truck of money.
Just dump the money truck.
They should be realizing my genius any day now.
Right. Thankfully, as a college senior, because I went straight in from undergrad to grad school, because I knew if I didn't go then, I was never going to go back to school. And I was very much aware of what I was signing up for. I almost didn't go. Like the big, debate I had was, again, because the decision of like which school was not a factor. It was like one or nothing. That was the big debate I had for months, even before I even heard yes. Like the application was Thanksgiving of 2013, and I heard like March or April of 2014. And then I had about a month or month and a half period to make a decision. And so I obviously the number is massive and it's terrifying, but I knew going into it what I was doing. I that was like the running joke with all my friends, like, oh yeah, like I'm screwed, I'm never going to pay this off. Which, that kind of humor doesn't translate into a print article. But yeah, I knew what I was signing up for, and the way I justified it in my head at the time, and even now, was like, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. There was no chance to defer. There was like, I'd have to apply again. And I knew, again, once I left the school system, and started working full time, I was never going back. And so just in that moment at that time, I was like, here's an opportunity. Here's life saying, here's your shot. You did the DIY thing for 4 years in undergrad. You helped build a program for future students. And here's the universe saying, here's a chance to actually invest in yourself and dive in and do something, that you wouldn't have had the chance to do if it wasn't for the last 4 years of work that you put in. Yeah, I think like I've never seen $300,000 like in my life before. What that physically looks like. It's like that scene from Dodgeball where he opens up the briefcase and it's like, people normally don't see this unless it's in the movie,
By the way, very good Ben Stiller. Very, very good Ben Stiller impression, my friend. Very, very good. No, I know it's almost I don't mean to make this light of it, but it's almost a comical number. Like it doesn't seem real.
It really is.
I can't even comprehend being $300,000+ in debt. And for everyone listening, you have to understand, like, Zack can't file bankruptcy. Like he can't. This is debt that will be with him. And again, dude, I don't mean to like rub salt in your wound. I'm just trying to educate people listening. So
that's okay.
No, but like this is debt that he will carry with him for the rest of his physical life. Maybe they'll figure out a way to take it to the next life. I don't know. Trust me, banks will figure a way to do it if they can. But and that's something that a lot of people who do sign these on, they're like, oh, I'll just file for bankruptcy. They're like, no. Right. Thanks to a certain president in the early 2000s, they signed a deal, a law stating that you cannot bankrupt yourself out of student loan. Okay, so all right, so let's go back. There's a lot of things I want to kind of open up here. Okay, so I'm not questioning the education that you got at Columbia. I'm sure it was top notch. I've spoken at USC, I've spoken at New York Film Academy, I've spoken to a lot of these schools, and I've talked to the instructors there, and I've seen the syllabus. I'm like, dude, I would have killed to go to USC. I would have killed to go to NYU coming up. They're amazing, amazing programs. But the ROI doesn't seem to make sense. And it's not just in filmmaking, but like I have a friend of mine who's a social worker who went and got a master's at USC for social work. I don't know about you, but I don't know a lot of rich social workers. That's generally not the way social work works. So she was in debt for 180 for work.
Right.
And then I had another friend who has a master's degree from Florida A&M or for Florida FIU, Florida International University. Same degree, different school. She was $20,000 in debt.
Right.
For social work. Do you see? Like, she's paid it off already.
Yeah.
The other one will never. So that's when I talk about ROI, I'm like, if you can afford the school, go for it. Film schools have a lot of benefits and potential, a lot of things, resources and context, like you were saying. But at $80,000 a year for those 2 years plus the next 2 years, the ROI doesn't make sense. Do you agree with what I'm saying?
I agree that the numbers sound crazy. Like I totally hear you on like the math and the article the Wall Street Journal article, they had this fun little graphic where you can like see, the school and the cost, and then like what the average person in that field is making
Makes.
2 to 3 years out of school. Like that in a bubble makes perfect sense.
Yes.
The part that I always like, because I've been having this conversation going on 4 years now, since I went to school in the first place, and the part that I always bring up to people is that a lot of the benefits of that ROI, like a lot of the things that you're investing into and like the dividends that investment pays are non-quantifiable, especially in relation to the like how much money you're making out of school. I spent the last 2 years in Los Angeles hustling and trying to do the Los Angeles thing. And so, I was entering a workforce where your entry level job is like 30 grand a year. Or
if you're lucky, if you're lucky,
right, if you're lucky, and like $15 an hour and no health insurance and all that jazz.
Right.
But even just on like a superficial level, what I had that a lot of these other, my peers in the workforce didn't have potentially was 4 feature screenplays that have been workshopped over the course of 4 years, work that got me a manager, which helped me bring myself out there. A short film that was nominated for and then won an Emmy, and that started conversations. And so there's, again, those are just sort of the superficial egotistical benefits. But even on that surface level alone, I don't know if like the kind of basic equation of like, what's the ROI from the cost of your degree? I don't know if that equation works. It's like we're trying to do like a divide by zero thing where we're ignoring, I can ramble about metaphors all the time.
Right.
But you know what I mean? I'm able to justify it for me based off of the work that I know and the experience that I had that doesn't factor into that equation. If that makes sense.
It does make sense to a certain extent, but like, as my wife always says, the numbers never lie, and all of those things are great. And look, I've when I got out and I was stuck with that debt, and I deferred it for a year, and my interest went up because I was working as an intern, making no money for the first 6 months or something like that, or something like that, or working as a PA making at the time $75 a day. Because I was back in the day, until I finally got my legs under me. And then once I got my legs under me and I started like, I have a job now. My first job in the business was making 23 grand as a tape vault guy in a commercial production house. Then I became an editor. And then I was making stupid money as an editor in Miami in the 90s when money was just flying everywhere. It was just everywhere. So, and I was able to pay off my debt little by little until I finally got it off. But the things that I learned this is my personal experience. The things that I loved my film school. I loved it. It was fun. I got to play. I got to learn. But a lot of the information that I learned there was very antiquated because I got caught right between the digital analog switch. So there was there was very little non-linear editing.
Right.
Like Avid wasn't a thing just yet, and there is no Final Cut yet, and any of that kind of stuff. So I was caught in that little weird place. So a lot of the stuff I learned, I could just talk to the old guys at the studios about, but really didn't help me get a job.
Right.
But so I'm not sure what the ROI was for my experience. But with all of that said, obviously, if you had a chance to go back and go, is this worth $300,000, or could I have made my short film without and still get an Emmy nomination without going to that school?
The answer is physically it's possible to do all those things, and maybe someone could have. And that's not to say that any like indie filmmaker listening like that. I'm not trying to say that film school is the way, like the Mandalorian. Like it's not. But for me, it was. And like, I don't, because I don't have, an uncle in the industry. Like New Jersey is as far away from the film industry as one can physically get geographically and still be in the United States. And so that was my way in.
Okay,
and that
fair
was
enough.
that was my way into jobs. Like I wouldn't have worked at MTV if it wasn't for undergrad. I wouldn't have gotten in at like the Tonight Show or Saturday Night Live if it wasn't for connections I made while in film school in New York City. So like even just from like a door opening, I know that's one of like the cliches that people say, oh, you go to film school, so it opens doors, you know. But it really did. And so I don't know if I'd be writing at the level I would be at now if it wasn't for film school. I don't know if I'd be as confident a director as I would be now if it wasn't for school. And so I wouldn't change anything, despite the debt.
So what was the purpose of you coming out publicly and, saying like I've been financially burdened, in that article, like I've got $300,000 plus dollars in debt. Like what was the purpose of you coming out? Because I understand, I get your point of view.
Totally.
I get you. There's no question you learned something and you got some bang for your buck. My personal opinion, don't think that education is worth that amount of money, where there are other programs that are more affordable, that could teach you a lot of those things. And even then in we talked about 2014, there's a tremendous amount of online education and, even going to other schools and things like that. There are other options at that point. It's not like it was 85.
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, like I wholeheartedly understand that it was not the only option, and I didn't feel pressured in any way. I like in reading, since the article came out, like reading the comment section, I think the thing a lot of people are missing is like, I know that it's crazy. I'm fully aware that.
But you're a filmmaker, so filmmakers are nuts. We're nuts. We're nuts. That's a starting point.
You have to be insane to grow up wanting to be an artist and to continue doing it. And
then to pay obscene amounts of money, because I paid obscene amounts of money as well. I only went to school I went to a special program. It was a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
And it was $25,000 in 1995 or 94 or whenever I went. So. That's insanity with no job prospects. It's not like it is now. Like now there's just jobs everywhere, but there's also a lot of people looking for those jobs. But in the 90s, are you kidding?
Yeah. No, but the reason why I wanted to speak up, there's a couple reasons. One, I mean, like objectively correct. Like school should not cost anything near what it costs in this country, I don't think the federal government should be making money off of the debt that they're, giving us. Like when we take out student loans, the interest rates are insane, and so
what's the interest rate? What's the interest rate? I don't even remember what mine was. So I don't remember.
It's in like this. I don't want to throw a number out and then be wrong.
Give or take, rough.
Yeah, I think it's like 6. I think in like the 6.
That's kind of 7. It's for education, man. You shouldn't be like it. Should be 1. It should be 1.
It should be nothing, or at the bare minimum, whatever like the prime, like
whatever prime is.
Yeah, whatever prime is. Like it should, like at a bare minimum, it should be that. Tuition shouldn't be that high. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But I just wanted to say like, hey, this is a thing that I experienced, and I did everything I could in my conversations in that to really stress that like I am not trying to. Like, I don't second guess anything. I'm not criticizing any aspect of the school itself. It's more like that's just the nature of how much school costs, and that's the problem. But also I knew that, like, having come from a journalism background, I've written for news before. I was a journalism major technically in undergrad, and so I knew how to talk to a reporter, and I felt comfortable talking to a reporter, and I knew a lot of my classmates did not feel comfortable doing so. And I also knew that there was the chance that if someone who, a classmate of mine who didn't feel comfortable talking to a reporter ended up feeling pressured to do so and then said something they regret on the record, then that's like a whole thing. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Sure. I have no problem.
So the reporter came looking for you guys, or did you go looking for them?
I woke up to an email in my inbox saying, hey, we're doing a story on student debt. You want to talk? And at that point, like I wasn't even on like Facebook and Twitter and whatever. I was not very private like about it. I have no shame in because it's a joke, right? Like it's hilarious. I own I'm mortgaging a house I'll never live in, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and so I even like I was a contestant. You know like the game show Pay It Off, like
Mhm.
it was a game.
No, did you
Yeah,
go
it
on
was a
that
game
show?
show on it was a game show on TBS. And like the bit was instead of giving you money, we give
Pay
you
off your
debt
student loan.
forgiveness. And so when they were workshopping it like in Brooklyn, I was one of their test contestants. And I went in and this was in like a like kind of warehouse in Brooklyn, and they were workshopping the game, and I was one of three contestants, and like two of them they were both undergrads, and I don't know, had like 20, one had 20, one had 50,000 in debt. And I was like, hi, I'm Zack Morrison. I'm 300K in debt. And there was just like a silence.
They're like, yeah, we
in the
can't have
room.
this. We can't. If
Like,
this guy wins, he's going to bankrupt us.
yeah. And like the game show, like clearly the game was not prepared for me to, and the funniest part was I won the test episode. But I,
That's horrible. Oh my god,
yeah.
that's wrong.
But like, and they were really great about it. Like that, like that whole crew they were fantastically supportive of it. It was really funny, and that was just from that moment on, I was like, I should just be talking about this because it's hilarious,
it is looking out. I mean, I'm glad you have a good attitude about it. If not, I mean, you have to have a good attitude about it. If not, you just, just at the end of it, just like, okay, it's over. But so, okay, so is most of your student debt federal?
It's 100% federal. Yeah.
It's 100% federal. So this is absolutely in the control of the U.S. government to help students and citizens get going in life without screwing them over with interest payments. Even if you went in and like, hey, I got $300,000 in debt, but every day I'm assuming you're not making the full payment.
Oh, I'm not making any payments.
So now it's just become a joke essentially.
Right, because it's income. Like I'm on the income-based repayment plan. I've been unemployed full time since the pandemic hit. I've been freelancing and gigging and
sure. But you're accruing interest.
Yeah, and like I'm on the income-based repayment plan, and according to that and like the tax bracket that I'm in, I don't have to make any payments. I'm paying what I can, but my payment plan is due $0 a month because they know I'm not making any money.
So on that stance, they're a little bit better than a bank, but not by much.
Not by much. And this is the federal government, and like they're why are we knowing how like the relationship between schools raising tuition and the government allowing loans to be larger and larger and larger. I'm not like an economist. I'm not a orator either. But like whatever that relationship is of like tuition rising and the government raising the ceiling of the loan limit, like if the government stops writing loans, maybe are we going to keep raising tuition if people can't, so like that macro issue, I think, is what I hope is the conversation that comes out of all this, is like, why does education cost so much?
Well, that's the thing too. I'm like, there's at a certain point, like I was saying with the social worker, like if the job you're trying to educate yourself to get or the career that you're trying to get doesn't even come close to the tuition you're paying to get it, does it make any sense to go to that school? Can you find that same education or an equivalent education at a cheaper school, a state school, something else like that? So like USC versus FIU, you're both getting quality education. They're both very good schools. Obviously, USC is more prestigious, but it's a private school. FIU is a state school. So if, for $20,000 or $160,000 for the education of a social worker who's going to make probably less than a filmmaker, which is scary, coming out, should that even be legal? Like I'm being honest here. Like, is it legal to charge someone $80,000 a year, and let's say it's a 2-year master's program?
Yeah.
So 160 plus whatever it costs to live in the state that you're going to go live in. Is it even legal to charge somebody that much when they know the school, I'm sorry, knows that the chances of the chances of the students in a 50 students in a film course going for a master's course, spending $160,000 for those 2 years. Let's say they don't do the 3, 4, and 5 year at Columbia. The chances of what is the percentage of those 50 people actually getting and making a living in our industry? It's fractional, and I mean, it is. So is that even a legal thing? And then of course you've got the government coming up with their numbers going, yeah, sure, just keep raising the limits, so it's allowing this thing to keep going, right?
Right. I mean, on the one hand, like, yes, it's legal.
No, it is legal.
Right. But also, I like, putting aside the specific schools costing specific amounts thing, because I don't know why, different schools charge what they do, and like it's not just like school costs. Like you can buy a sandwich for $5. Like, sandwiches are $5. Education should just be whatever education costs.
But you could also spend $35 for a sandwich.
You could,
and it's still bread, cheese, a meat, and maybe a special sauce.
But again, just putting it in from like my specific situation, those were the options available to me, and I was like, because undergrad, the students who are at Rutgers today are getting a significantly better filmmaking education than I got when I was a student there. And so, I went to the most like affordable DIY. Like, I taught myself most of what I know about shooting and editing, and then class was just like a place to put it to work, but then, when the grad school question came around, I had all the, like, everything that I was going to learn from YouTube filmmaking tutorials, like all the technical I had down. I can shoot, I can edit, I can do all the things. Now I need a place where I can actually apply the craft and workshop the artistic decision making, and that it was that, like, I want to be a writer director. I don't want to be a working cinematographer. I had the knowledge base to be a working cinematographer. What I wanted was an environment where I can write stuff, put it up on its feet, and workshop it in that artistic, critique environment among my peers. And, I have friends who are in the industry, but I don't know if I could have gotten 50 people in a room on a weekly basis to like discuss the craft of directing,
No, I got it. It's just, again, the cost. It's the ROI. Right. Could you have done that exact same thing in another program somewhere else at a fraction of the cost? Even if it was, even at $20,000 a year, which is still obscene, you could probably have found that somewhere. Who knows?
You know what? If another school that was cheaper said yes, I would have considered it. Sure. And without a doubt, you can find anything you want at almost any school. Like, I don't believe that any one school is specifically that place is going to make or break your ability to make it in the industry. Right?
I mean, if history is, Spielberg, Tarantino, the list goes on and on. That they did not go to film school.
They didn't. I will say that for every person who's successful that didn't go to film school, there are a billion who did. George Lucas, Marty Scorsese, But
that was a different generation, though.
Yeah.
That's a different generation. That is called the film school generation. Like, that is the generation of film students that there was no other option, and they took over Hollywood and that whole thing.
Sure.
But more recently, I've seen a lot more. There are USC, man, pumps out people left and right, and I know that program well. And the connections you make in USC is worth the tuition, to be honest with you. Yeah. At USC, the money you're spending is to make contacts with your fellow students who all end up going somewhere because they went to that program. NYU has a similar, not as much to my understanding, but AFI is the same way. Things like that. But yeah, go ahead. Continue.
No, I would argue Columbia was the same way. All of my friends who I graduated school with are all in the industry. They're all working. They're all going to be executive. 5 of them are already creative executives. Like, 2 of them are heads of development at studios. Like, it's like, there's so much of that Like, that's why I went, because I want to, make friends with an actual true creative collaborative friendships with people who are going to hustle as hard as me, if not 10 times harder,
Right.
And so because I've done like these, like, I've sat on a debate panel with like the no film school guy. And we went back and forth at like a film festival. Like, do you go to school? Do you not go to school? And it just came down to like,
it's individual. It's an individual choice.
yeah, it just came down to like, do what you can, and do what's available to you.
Yeah. Listen, this is the thing there's certain people and certain filmmakers that need that structure and want that structure and want those resources. And that's perfectly fine. I went to film school. I get it. But there's others who like, you know what, I'm going to do it all myself. And I'm 19 and I'm going to go make my first feature and I'm going to fail a whole bunch, but I'll make my first feature for 15, 20 grand, learn a whole lot there and keep going. And I'll just hustle and hustle and hustle, but I won't have any debt. So those are the two roads you can go down.
Yeah.
I don't think that film school is a waste of time at all. I think if you can afford it, go for it. But I have a problem with the cost. And I think you have a problem with the cost.
I do.
There's no problem with the actual program themselves in Columbia or NYU or USC. Their costs are astronomical and only growing every year. Right. So 5 years from now, someone who went down your program could be $500,000 or $500,000 in debt.
Yeah.
When you start getting into over a couple, you're talking doctor lawyer numbers. As far as doctors and lawyers have an output to make a lot of money.
I was in school long enough to be a doctor. If I went to any other school with any other program, I'd have my PhD by now.
Right.
But at the same time, just like you said, doctors and lawyers, they take out a lot of money because there's potential to make a lot of money. The film industry is the 11th largest industry in the country. And so that same potential, despite it being like the arts, and we kind of make,
I know what I mean? I know it's the 11th biggest band, but dude, you know as well as I do that the chances are astronomical.
Yeah, they're not. But like, I want to be the guy on the missile at the end of Doctor Strangelove, like riding this thing into the ground.
You're an anarchist, sir. You're an anarchist. I can tell you're an anarchist.
No, it's just like you have, like, if you're gonna pursue the industry, you can't let things like the percentage of people who make it.
Agreed.
Like the how hard it is to break in. You can't let that stuff stop you.
No, I agree. Dude, my entire business is wrapped around that. I agree with you 100%. I'm here to teach filmmakers. These are the realities of what the hell's going to happen to you guys. I'm not saying don't stop, but don't be an idiot about it. Like I always say, follow your dream, but don't be an idiot. But the cost is still the thing. Like if you can go down this road at a much more affordable rate, or at another school or another program, great. And you had a BA and you just wanted to go in to get a master's, and that was your choice. And you were like, what, 20,000, 30,000 the whole prior to the...
Oh yeah, I completely undid like the smart thinking that I did going to my state school,
Right. I remember like, yeah, I can't go at Emerson. That's crazy.
No, it went to Rutgers New Jersey State.
Right.
It was great. but yeah, I completely undid that. And I went to undergrad at Rutgers for financial reasons, so I like knowingly flipped that switch when Columbia called.
It's insane. Yeah, no, I don't know if at your age I would have made much of a different conversation. I would have made a different decision. I'll be honest with you, because I came from Florida, as far south as you could get from Hollywood.
Yeah.
So if I would have applied, I couldn't apply to it because I didn't go to a 4-year school, so I couldn't apply to NYU, and my high school was ridiculous. My number, I barely made it through high school. So if I would have gotten a call from NYU or USC or UCLA or AFI at 17, 18, I would have said whatever it takes.
Yeah. And
I was just lucky that I came out at a time when Full Sail said yes, which they said yes to anybody with a checkbook. They did. Anybody with a checkbook they'll accept. It only hurt me about 25 grand. and that was something I could climb out of. But I don't think I would have made much of a different decision than you did, man. I'll be honest with you. At that time in my life, I'd be like, oh my God, a film program. Look who's come out of there. Especially Columbia is a good film program. I didn't mean to disparage it at the beginning, but that's generally, you don't hear that name is not the one that comes up. It's USC, UCLA, and NYU. These are
definitely.
Those are the big ones.
It's only reached its, like it's made like the 90s and onward, even like early 2000s and onward is really when it like saw an exponential curve from like the nothingness into, that like, again, that Hollywood Reporter article that comes out every year. But yeah, because you're right. Even at 17, or even at I was 22 when I was grad school. Like it's like screw it. Like what what else am I going to be doing with my life?
And you at that age, and I hope everyone listening understands, when you're that young, you don't really understand what you're doing. You understand what you're doing, but the numbers don't seem real. Because I just let it. I'm not paying, and mine weren't federal. Mine were like loans from like banks.
I will say though, I don't know if it's fair to, on like a blanket way, to say that a 22-year-old doesn't know what they're doing. And that's, again, I think that's like when we're talking about this, like the kind of broader ripples in the myth, the whatever zeitgeist that happened since that article dropped. Like there's been a lot of conversation like, oh, a 21-year-old or a 19-year-old doesn't know what they're doing. And I think for the most part, a lot of them do. And despite the insanity of like going to school for that amount of money, it was a very like cognizant choice that I made. And I know a lot of my classmates, it was a very active and researched and nuanced decision.
No, I'm not. You're. I'm not saying that all 22-year-olds are uneducated and they can't make. They're like, you're dumb, you're young. No, I'm not saying that, because I was at 22. I wasn't the seasons that I am today. Let's just put it that way. I would make different choices now if I had my brain back in my 22-year-old body. Many different things I would do. But generally speaking, though, like even with me, and I'll just use my point of view. When I signed on, I'm like, oh, here's another $5,000 here. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to take another $6,000 there. The numbers don't seem real. At least they didn't for me. They don't. They just look. They just a couple numbers on a piece of paper. Like they don't. They don't seem. You don't feel the gravitas, just like that Ben Stiller thing in Dodge, where like, if you saw $6,000 cash or $20,000 cash, you'd be like, holy, that's a lot of money.
Right. And if I, if I at any point like had to do something where I handled that amount of money before, like you're right, like it didn't feel real in that sense, right? Because I never saw it. It was like in and out of, like, it never even hit. The only thing that did hit was like the refund that I would get, where it was like that extra like $20,000 for the year to like for living in New York City, that extra part of the loan. That part I saw. And then, so that was my living budget for the year, was that like $20,000 every year, because, I didn't have time to work. So like that was like, that part of it felt real, because
you lived off of it.
Right. Cause I was like, this is what I have to live off of. And I also had to shoot my movies within that budget as well. And
this insanity. Like Did you eat ramen? Did you eat ramen all the time?
A lot of ramen, lot of, it was New York, so there's always like cheap food joints around the corner. Sure. I lived in Harlem for 4 years and loved it. So like there was, and then thankfully New Jersey is a 30-minute train ride out of Penn Station. So, like my family, my support system were also on the East Coast, and that definitely made it a lot easier. But there, like metaphorically, there was a lot of ramen nights.
That was like 20,000 in New York City, bro. Even in the mid 2000s is not. It's
like I lived in what should have been a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 dudes, and like thankfully they were my college roommates who I do all my movies and like comedy with. So like we were already used to living on top of each other. But it was close quarters for a while.
God, and I assume dating was a little rough back then.
It was interesting in the sense that there was no real time for it.
No socks on the doorknob.
Oh, what door?
You had a front door, didn't you? You had a front door.
We had a front door, but there was no
Oh, no, no, no,
separation
no.
from the
No,
bedroom to the kitchen.
I understand that because I lived in a similar
Yeah.
situation in college as well. No, in the front door, there's no
Oh
doorknob.
yeah. There
There's
was yeah.
the tie
We
wrapped
had
around.
that system figured out. But like again, it was like those 4 to 5 years. That was an experience, that again in hindsight, thinking of like what did I get out of going into that debt for? Like that was an experience in my early to mid 20s that it changed my life.
Oh, of course.
And that was one of those life things that like I'm gonna write about in wherever the hell I write it. Like so it's little, even like those little, like the hell of living as a young person in New York City, and that, taking the subway to 30 Rock at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, like all those things are, that's all part. It was all part of the experience of doing it. That again, if you ask me like, would you do it again, or would you change your decision? All of those things contribute into like no way in hell would I change any of it.
And that is the insanity of being a filmmaker.
Yeah.
It is the insanity of what we do. I mean, it's insane. I have to ask you though, do you think that student debt will be the next financial bubble? Because I mean, you're
like 100%. I think that's and it's not just the arts; it's everything. I think the arts is like the easy target for a lot.
Oh no,
of
but
these
student debt,
conversations.
but student
Yeah,
debt in
but
general.
like the student debt in a very macro sense, like it's such a problem, because we're going to have an entire generation, that is like entering the prime of their working lives with too much debt, because like and jobs across the board today don't pay what they should be paying. Like specifically just in the industry, because that's what the jobs that I've worked. We're working $15 an hour because those jobs were $15 an hour in 1994. And it's just like
Listen, I was getting paid $50 an hour to edit commercials in the 90s.
Yeah.
And now that's dropped down to 20 because there's so many more editors out there. So
it's wild.
It's dropped down. So now there's more job opportunities, but you're not getting paid nearly as much. I mean, I used to get paid 50 to 75 an hour, depending on if I'm working promos or I'm working for a network or something like that. It was and I lived at home.
Right.
It was insane. I was in my 20s living at home. It was great. But I think that you're absolutely right. I think that student debt will be the next thing that I think it has more. There's more student debt than there is credit card debt now.
That's insane.
That's in the United States. Like there's more student debt and only going up, and the cost of education is only going up. So, but you're not getting more educated. You're not you're not coming out like, well, it cost you $300,000, but you're making $450 first year out. Like, no, that's not
right. And then there's also that part, like, yes, like now in this present moment, I'm making $30,000 a year, but and specifically with the entertainment industry, there's no middle class. It's you're making nothing until you're making guild minimum, and then that's a life-changing amount of money, and it's like you flip a switch, and so at least in the back of my mind when those like 2 a.m. panic attacks are happening, about like how the hell am I ever, that was like the thing they quoted me on. The thing was like, how the hell am I ever going to pay this off? At least I know like the economics of the industry, as backwards as they can be sometimes. It takes one thing to go from from nothing into making guild minimums and selling scripts and like that land. Still very, very hard, and it's a very small target, but like there's no middle ground. So we're just kind of, once that happens, then I'll pay my student debt off. But that's at least that's in the back of my head, is like, there is a way out of this.
Yeah, there is. I understand what you're saying, and there's always that opportunity, and that's the magic that Hollywood sells. Right. That Hollywood's really good at the sizzle, really sucks at the steak. And I've said this before on the show, I'll say it again. And you've lived in LA, so you'll know what I'm talking about. If you go down to Hollywood Boulevard, it is not what it looks like on the Oscars.
No, it's not great.
It's not really great. But around the world, Hollywood Boulevard is this place that everybody thinks like, oh my God, it's, the Chinese theater and everything. And for like a block and a half, it looks cool. But if you cross the street, grab your purse. And
well, it's like Times Square. It's the same thing. It's like when I first started working at MTV, like 1515 Broadway is at like that's Times Square. Is the Viacom building, and I was like, this is so cool, you know. And like growing up watching Nickelodeon, they were always like, you want to write to us, right? At like 1515 Broadway, you know. And I for my first day at MTV, I was like, this is the coolest thing. I got off the subway at Times Square. I was like a Jersey boy, so I wasn't like city savvy yet. And then after that first day, I was like, this is hell. This is the worst.
Is that an Elmo? Is that an Elmo? What is that?
Yeah, Times Square Elmo. I would say that I prefer Times Square Elmo over Hollywood Boulevard Batman.
Hollywood Boulevard Batman. He's rough. He's rough. Yeah, he's the one that gets into fights every once in a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I liked Hollywood Boulevard Superman before he passed.
Oh, okay.
They did the documentary on him, and he was like,
oh right.
He literally looked like Christopher Reeve, but a lot thinner. He was God. Anyway, now we're going on a deep off on a tangent. but it's just to use an example of what Hollywood sells, and Hollywood is especially here in Hollywood, it is the land of broken dreams, because everybody comes out with like, I could be found, I could be discovered, I could sell that script, I can make that movie, all these kind of things that can blow me up. And is there potential for that? Absolutely. But those are lottery ticket conversations.
100%.
But what you're talking about is not even lottery ticket. You're just like, dude, guild minimum will change my effing life.
Right.
Like, this is not like you're not going after $1 million a year. You're like going for 60 a year.
Oh yeah. No.
70 a year.
like Writers Guild minimum would be fantastic.
Like I would be
right now
rolling. I would be I'd be like just all day. No, but it's true. And I remember coming up, I was like, oh my God, if I could get like DGA minimum to be a first AD or second AD, coming up, I'd be like, oh my God, that would be amazing, you know, and all that stuff. But then I jumped into post and went down that road. But yeah, this is a long conversation. It can keep going for hours and hours. I think that I'm very grateful that you came out to talk about this, because I personally hadn't heard of debt that much for film school. Yeah. When I heard about it, I was disgusted by the cost. I was like, what the F is going, like, I personally think there should be no school that charges that much for a film degree. I think the degree should relate to how much money that is expected for someone to make in the business, and they have to be relatable. They just have to be, because if not, you can go to $100,000 a year a pottery class and get an MFA and a master's in pottery, and you could be like the best potter in the world, but chances of you making that money back it's just no real chance. So like social work, and I use social work in the film industry because social work is an actual, like, you can get a job as social work. There's a lot of we need social workers in the world.
You can get a job in the film industry too, but
you can. Right. I'm not saying you can't. But the amount of people going after those jobs in the film industry is a lot more than there are going after the social work industry. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Because social work's not that sexy. Hollywood, super sexy, super like everybody wants to be in. Everybody wants to make movies. Everybody really just wants to direct, honestly. The old joke,
right?
But yeah, and I agree with you. I think we're both on the same page for the most part. I still don't think the education you got is worth the money that you paid, but I don't devalue the education, and I don't devalue the opportunities that program got you by connections and job offers and things. Because I know how like corporate like Viacoms and those guys on, like, they'll look like, we'll take interns from Columbia and NYU only, because they're like that's their way to weed out all the crazies like me trying to get in when I was younger, or like, but I didn't go to those schools. Well, we only take interns from this or that. So, but I think we're pretty much on the same page. Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally hear you. You know, I think that I absolutely wish that school did not cost what it did. You know, I think like any rational person would agree on that. I'm not ready to say that I don't think it was worth it yet. You know,
how old are you now?
I'm 29.
Talk to me in 10 years. Call me back.
Hey, you know what? I hope at 10 years I'm at least making guild minimum. So that would be that.
Dude, that's doable, man. You should absolutely be making guild minimum back then. No, I listen, man. I understand, bro. I understand completely. This is you're talking to a guy who's 47. So I've been around the block a little bit longer than you have. Totally. But you definitely have experiences that I do not have, without question. I just think that anyone listening really needs to think very carefully before they go down a road like this.
Absolutely.
And it depends on what school you're going to go to, what program it is. Is that program worth it? I'm a hustler, as my T-shirt and hat and company say. I'm a self-generating kind of guy. Like I'll educate myself. I'll read. I'll go do things.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of personality I have. There's a lot of people who don't have that personality and need to, not that that's wrong, but would benefit from a school program that's structured and stuff. I get that 110%. But they really need to think very carefully about if they're going to jump into this, even if they're jumping into $100,000 of debt. That's a lot of money, man.
Yeah. No, I like absolutely. And like growing up in New Jersey, like the hustle, the grind, like that's, I appreciate having had that, like, gotta hustle, DIY, do it live environment before I went to structure. Because all of undergrad for me was that. It was, we were shooting our own films on weekends. We were hustling. It was, it was that mentality. Watching a lot of like Philip Bloom videos. And Film Riot and all those guys. Because we wanted to figure out how to do that camera thing. And so I totally hear you on the hustle. And I think there is a balance that any filmmaker who wants to make it needs to have, of like the tenacity to keep going, combined with like whatever avenue is going to help you learn how to do the thing that you need to learn how to do it, and so I'm with you on that. 90% of this is just, you have to have enough energy and passion and drive to keep, after every rejection, to keep going. It's quite literally, you just have to outlast everybody. And
it's not generally the most talented that outlasts everybody. And that's something that people need to understand. It's not about how talented you are, because I've met an obscene amount of people in the industry during my days who they should not be where they are. They shouldn't be doing what they are, but they just are tenacious and they did not give up. Where other people who I've talked to, I'm like, my God, you're so effing talented. Like, your script, I've read this script. You should be making this into a feature. You should be blowing up. And they don't. They just gave up, because this is one of the most brutal industries there is.
Oh, absolutely. Like 90% of my day to day is rejection emails or getting ghosted by jobs or people who are like, oh yeah, we're looking for a person for this or person for that. It's just that's my status quo is rejection. But I always joke that it's like, oh, like we're at a deli and we're just waiting, we're waiting in line for our number to be called. And it's like, what are you going to be doing during the time, that you pulled your ticket and that they call your number? Are you going to have the rest of your shopping done? Are you going to like know what you're making for dinner that night? Like, again, I speak almost exclusively in metaphors, but it's like, you just have to keep going. And then when you get your shot, take it. But be ready to take it when your number's called.
Now, I was going to ask you, what advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today? But I think you've answered that question right there. It's like, just don't give up.
Right.
And also, there is a thing about not giving up, because I can run into a wall head first and not give up. But at a certain point, you're going to go, my head hurts. Maybe I should figure a way around the wall, under the wall. Maybe I should buy a tool, something along those lines. So, yes, be tenacious, but if things aren't working, reevaluate and
absolutely,
and keep trying different angles to get in. And listen, dude, I've been trying to get into the business for 20 odd years. I try to hack my way in. I try to like sneak my way in. I always was trying to like get invited or sneak in through the back door. And the moment I stopped doing that and then just started to honestly, when I started this show is when the doors all opened up for me.
That's great.
And because I was giving back to the community, and then I was making contacts with people and things like that. And it's insane. But I wasn't trying anymore in that sense. I was trying in another way. Again, beating your head against a door or a wall, and then that didn't work. It took me 20 years to figure that out. So again, not the brightest, but now it's at a different place. So I think you did answer that question. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
The lesson that took me the longest, probably. I mean, I think I'm still working on it, but to value my own worth. I know that sounds insane after a conversation about all the debt that I'm in. But what I
that's great.
What I mean by that is to trust myself as a person who is allowed to be where I am right now. Mm-hmm. I and especially just from like all the the early jobs in the film industry I worked, where it's like, don't talk to me, don't do this. Like, you can't be here. Why are you here? Like, that meant, like, I quit a job that will go nameless in 2020, right before the pandemic, which was a dumb decision because I missed out on unemployment. But it was because my boss had this attitude of, why are you talking to me right now? And it was my job to be constantly talking to him. And so, like, I realized, like, I'm allowed to be here. Like, it's my job to be here. And so, in context of like pursuing the dream in the film industry, it's like, it's my job to be a filmmaker. I'm allowed to be a filmmaker. It's that, like, fight. How do you fight that imposter syndrome? And so, like, I'm writing what I think is going to be my first feature film right now, after having written like 5 or 6 feature screenplays. And I'm still working on finding the confidence to say, like, yes, this is I'm going to do this. And I have the skills and the self wherewithal to be able to write this. And so I don't know if I've fully learned how to do that yet, but that's the work in progress. It's just like learning how to, know what my self-worth is, and like just do the thing that I have spent 10, 15 years practicing doing. And
I think what you said with self-worth, I think we, especially when you're coming into the business, man, you think people think make you feel worthless. Right. And they're like that guy that you were just saying, like, why are you talking to me? I had those bosses. I had those people, and I completely understand it. And if you do need to understand your worth, even if you're just an intern on a movie set, there should be no abuse. There should be a level of respect. You're a human being offering a service, and you should feel that way. And I love that comment. It's like, I deserve to be here. Like, I'm a human being. I'm here. Respect me and respect what I'm trying to do here. And I like that idea. I like that concept very much. I think it's something that definitely needs to be put out there. And 3 of your favorite films of all time, sir.
Oh man, 3 of my favorite films. Number 1 is The Blues Brothers, without a doubt. I would argue it's one of the best films ever made. I grew up playing the saxophone, between the Blues Brothers soundtrack and like every Clarence Clemens solo in a Springsteen song, like that was my way into art, was music. So the Blues Brothers was a huge influence on me. My film that won the award was a musical. And so that just like style and genre, like that will always be near and dear to my heart. Number 2 is My Cousin Vinny.
Genius film.
I think it's as a screenplay, it's perfect. Like, anyone who wants to learn like screenplay structure and rules of comedy writing, where like every joke has a payoff in the 3rd act, like that is a perfect screenplay. And then the 3rd one, just because it's a film that I love, that I think no one else really truly loves the way I do, but A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger.
It's a genius film. I love that. I just watched it the other day. It was great.
I love it. It's like, it's a 2-hour cheese fest, but like the soundtrack's great, and I cry at the end every time. I don't care. It's an amazing movie. I
absolutely love Nice. All good choices, sir. All good choices. And last question, man, what do you say to a potential film student thinking about going to film school today?
Okay.
After this entire conversation,
Right.
I would like, if I'm 17, I'm 17. I'm like, he goes, Zach, man, I'm thinking about, you went to film school. I hear it's cool. What do you, what advice do you have? Should I do that, or should I just watch like Film Riot and listen to Indie Film Hustle and just go my own way? What would you say to me?
I would say to a young person who wants to be a filmmaker, and I didn't know the answer to this question when I was 17. So whenever you figure this out, in my opinion, after having gone through it, if you want to be a cinematographer, an editor, a first AD, if you want to work in production, if some part of the technical is what you want to do, and you know that that's the life path you want to have, I don't think you need to go. I think you can learn, you can go get a camera, you can go shoot, you can edit, you can make a bunch of stuff, you can learn the technical. Like, without a doubt, you don't need like a degree in sound editing or cinematography to become a sound person or a cinematographer, because that you just learn by doing and playing. If you want to be a writer director or a screenwriter, or because I think writing and directing are like two halves of the same skill set. If you want to be that person, then you have to figure out, are you in a position to make work now? If you want to be a screenwriter, are you in a position where you can write material and also get quality feedback from not your mom, right? Or from not the friend that's going to say like, it's great, it's perfect, I love it. If you can, or if you have like that, if you can be Quentin Tarantino, who can lock himself in a cabin in the woods and write Reservoir Dogs, like, awesome.
Yeah, but you could go to writers groups. You can online. Like, there's a lot of places.
Whatever the access to that is, if you have that, I don't know if you need to go to film school. If you, or like me, who does not have that, if none of your friends are art people, if none of your friends are writers, if you don't have at 17 years old, like a writing mentor or access to the artistic resources, not even the technical resources, but like access to those artistic environments where you can workshop stuff and shoot stuff and like play it for people and get honest feedback. If you don't have that, maybe you consider it, because that to me is the biggest value that I got out of film school, is that artistic environment. And so I know, like, it's not that easy of like a yes or no. I just think if you're the kind of writer that loves to write in a cabin in the woods, or you have that writers group already and you're getting good, constructive, positive, and like forward momentum on your work there, like that's what I got in film school. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It does answer the question, and I think your main point is like, if you can have colleagues that will look at your work, give you constructive criticism, work with you on things. Maybe you take a handful of online courses. Maybe you take some local courses, or fly out to take some workshops with some high level people, and get into community. I think your big thing was community and having access to other people. And trust me, I know what you're talking about, because I came from Florida, which did Miami, which was no films. Like it was like I was starving. I watched Entourage as my way to connect with the film industry, as sad as that might be. Or behind the scenes videos of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But if you can find that, it's not necessary. But again, if it's affordable, there's a lot of local programs around the country.
Absolutely.
Community college, a lot of great community colleges have access to gear, teachers who will help you learn that gear. And I love what you said about, if you want to be a technician, generally speaking, you don't need a 4-year degree, let alone a master's, to make it in this business. That's been very well established. But if you want to be a technician, you might go and take some classes, take some workshops in that. I mean, you can go to LA or New York and take, ASC workshops by ASC cinematographers, or online. You can pick up a lot of stuff too.
Or you can just go shoot stuff. Like my
that too.
My good buddy, his name's Adam Volrich. He's the best DP I've ever met. He's my first phone call whenever I have a project. we both went to Rutgers together, and he has been like hustling his ass off for years in the New York City scene as a working DP, and he's spent like the same time that I put into film school learning to be a writer, he was out there shooting, learning to be the best DP he can possibly be. And I like, whenever I talk to like even prospective Rutgers students, or just I was teaching a high school class in New Jersey the last 2 weeks for like a film summer academy, and I was talking to the students, and they were like, do I go to film school or not? And I was like, here's me and my buddy, and we both had 2 different paths, and neither path is mutually exclusive in terms of benefits from the other. It's just whatever your path takes you, do that. Like, if you have access to stuff, follow that access. And if you need access, just like you're running through the wall, if you need to get to the other room, find a way into the other room. Mm-hmm.
But you would generally say, don't go $300,000 in debt.
On the whole, if you can avoid it, like, try to not go $300,000 in debt. Yeah.
Just as a general statement.
As a general rule,
not a great thing. Zach, bro, man, I can't thank you enough for being so transparent and honest and raw about yours, and actually just good humored about what you've gone through, and sharing this, sharing your story with my tribe and with filmmakers around the world. I think it's a conversation that needs to continue to be had, and I think I think this has been a good conversation. I hope anyone on the fence can figure out what's right for them going down the road. But I wish you much success on your journey, my friend, and thank you so much for being on the show, man. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex. I really appreciate it.